All right, hello wine drinking people. We are back with more of what I had to drink yesterday. And like I said, it's been a crazy year. We have had so much drinking going on, still getting caught up with what's happened a week ago or so, the Bouchard Pere Feast tasting 2010 in William Fevre here at the store. We had 14 wines from these two great producers and a lot of great stuff. This 2010 vintage looks to be another outstanding vintage in Burgundy. Maybe not quite as forward as 2009, but man, these wines showed very nicely. I wasn't expecting them to be as forward and as drinkable with what the press has been on the vintage. You know, it being a more classic vintage and not as showy as 2009. But man, definitely some shades of greatness here in this tasting with all throughout the entire lineup. And you know, we sold some wine. That is the key to me of success. People like the wines. Yes, they did buy them. And this 2010 vintage going to be very highly sought after by collectors, it looks like. All right, we started out with the Chablis. And, you know, in Burgundy, usually they'll start with the reds and then go to the whites. But, well, we did the whites first. And the Morseau Premier Cru, this wine had a lovely fresh butter toast, lime, and chalky mineral note to the nose. Really bright and fresh, classic Chablis, very precise. Lovely richness on the mouth, mouth-puckering acidity. Just screams for food. Goat cheese was really nice with this, along with the Epoisse and the Saint Andre. All three cheeses works really nice with these Chablis here. Racy on the finish, really long, seems to have this endless minerality, just like, again, leaving your tongue salivating for food. Excellent juice. Then the Valorant, so this is the only Premier Cru Chablis on the Grand Cru slopes. So very classic, chalky minerality, lace nose, bright lemon, Jolly Rancher candy. Considerable difference between this wine and the Montmans in level of concentration, but, you know, similar style. Very rich on the palate, slightly oily texture with that chalk and minerally note lasting all the way through the finish. Very long and balanced. A bit tart. This wine needs a little bit of time, or hey, just some more goat cheese. Most excellent. The Valorant for, you know, just a few dollars more. And then the Le Clos, the big boy. Le Clos is probably the best known of all the Grand Crus in Chablis, and had this permeating aroma of this chalky, briny minerality, just twice as intense as the Montmans or the Valorant, and a huge step up in concentration when you get to the Grand Cru level in Chablis, in a great vintage. Pretty lime blossoms and lemon curd showing through on the nose. This Le Clos just fills the palate from the center out. Lovely, creamy citrus fruit, green apple. Very precise with layers of minerality on the finish. Killer juice, the Chablis 2010. For $100, it's not cheap, but for Grand Cru Burgundy, still not crazy expensive. All right, coming up next, the Bouchard Pere Feast wines. We started out with the Beaune Clos Saint Landry. This is a Premier Cru. It was purchased by the Bouchards in 1791. Wow, one of the oldest vineyards in the domain's holdings, and considered to be one of the oldest Chardonnay vineyards in the Côte de Beaune. And Landry was the family name before the Bouchards bought it from them, and they've kept the name in honor of them all these years. Fresh green apple and stone marl-like minerality component shown through on the nose with light flowers. Really crisp apple and lemon citrus on the tongue. Nice richness in the mid-palate. Fresh mineral-laced finish. A little hint of salt, leaving the tongue ready for food. Excellent juice. The Morseau Le Clos, which this is a Climat of Morseau, not a Premier Cru. This Marl terroir, very similar to Corton Charlemagne, only the topography and the altitude are what's different here. This is a cut above most village Chablis, though, and deserves to be vinified separately. That's why the Bouchards do. Hints of butter, toast, flinty, minerally quality to that fat red apple fruit on the nose. A lovely creamy texture to this one on the tongue. Rich fruit, lovely layered finish. Very classic Morseau, still a baby, but drinking surprisingly good right now. Like I said, this 2010 vintage is supposed to be a classic vintage, but some of the whites very showy as well. Some of the reds, the Morseau Genevières, one of the best Premier Crus. This could be elevated to Grand Cru status in some people's minds. The juniper is really showing through on the nose here. Classic toasty matchstick quality, smoky notes, pineapple fruit, licorice, nutmeg, spice. Really exotic bouquet in this wine. Really different from the Clu. Rich but more fine and precise. Lots of that stone and minerality quality shown in that exotic spice, the juniper. Really lovely finish on this wine. Long, most excellent juice, this 2010 Genevières. All right, the 2010 Corton Charlemagne. Bouchard Pere Feast is the third most important owner of Corton Charlemagne. This wine has a very complex bouquet, vanilla, creme flan, pronounced minerality that really is Corton Charlemagne. Tangy, lemon, Jolly Rancher, candy-like fruit on the tongue, really rich and layered, almost oily lovely texture here. Very rich. Did I already say that once? Man, this wine is all that, and a box of chocolates. Finishes with that pronounced minerality and that toasty oak spice. Really classic. You could keep this for 30 years or more. Most excellent. All right, the Savigny Le Bon La Lavieres. This is a Premier Cru named after the large flat stones in the area. A bright red cherry and raspberry notes, fresh mint and floral notes on the nose as well. Very smooth and velvety on the tongue. Bright raspberry and red cherry fruit, along with chalk-like mineral notes. Nice zest and freshness here. The Lavieres, excellent juice. The Bon Clos de Mousse. The oldest traces of Clos de Mousse go back to 1220. During the French Revolution, this vineyard was divided up, and in the 19th century, the Bouchards bought it all back, and today it is a monopole. They exclusively the only ones that produce this. That's what that means. The wine is always charming at any stage in its life, but this was the best wine to drink today on the table. Lovely cherry pie fruit, a little cola spice, forward and seductive, smooth and silky on the tongue with lots of that red cherry fruit and that cola spice showing through on the finish. Really bright, but still, you could keep this wine for a decade at least. Excellent juice. The Gevrey-Chambertin village was next. This is one of the most famous villages in the Côte de Nuit because of its concentration of Grand Crus like the legendary Chambertin Clos de Bez, the favorites of Napoleon. A meaty animal note to this dark cherry fruit, notes of mint and fresh earth there as well. Good grip on the palate with this wine. Noticeable tannins, a good amount of dark cherry fruit, firm acidity, and that animal character showing through on the tightly wound finish there. I suggest another 3 to 5 years with this village wine, but excellent. Next up, the Pomard Premier Cru, the chalky clay soils, colored red by the ferrous oxide, or what gives Pomard its intense color and fine aromas, as Victor Hugo wrote. The wines of Pomard have gust inspiration, occasionally genius. And the Premier Cru just means it's a blend of several different Premier Cru vineyards. They have a little more leeway with this. Red plum and cherry fruit on the nose. Dark and meaty nuance, a light smoky note to the bouquet as well. Big and chewy on the tongue with lots of fruit and tannins, but the tannins fairly ripe in this wine as well. Needs some time, but has all the right stuff. Distinct minerality showing through on the finish as well. Excellent juice. This Premier Cru Pomard. The Volnay-Cailleret Cuvée Ancienne Carnot. This is the first vineyard bought by the house in 1775, and the Carnot family from whom it was purchased, still mentioned on the label. These guys paying respect to a lot of these people they bought the vineyards through. The vineyard site, considered to be among the best in Volnay, was rated tête de cuvée as far back as 1855 by Dr. Laval. This one had a light, smoky, and leathery character to the nose with red cherry fruit, oriental spice, rose petals, floral note. Really pretty and nuanced. Good stuffing on the palate with thick red cherry fruit and some fine tannins in the mouth. Really mouth-puckering acidity. This Volnay Cuvée Ancien needs some time, but some lovely exotic spice, and you can just tell it has all the right stuff. Most excellent juice indeed. The Le Corton Grand Cru up next. The first traces of vineyards at Alex Corton go back to the 2nd century BC. Le Corton was the favorite of King Charlemagne, and many current-day critics have also waxed poetic about the wines of Le Corton, which is the only Grand Cru AC for red wine in the Côtes de Beaune. A little bit of trivia there. Good intensity of dark cherry fruit, gravelly minerality on the nose, along with notes of spice and earth, raspberry and wild strawberry-like fruits on the tongue with a firm hand of tannins here, mouth-puckering acidity, dark spices, distinct minerality here. Needs time. Will be a classic in 20 years, the 2010 Le Corton. And then, of course, the Baby Jesus. This is a name refers to an old story about a nun that predicted the birth of the King of France, Louis XIV, and although her mother, Anne of Australia, was sterile. Okay, sound familiar? All right, after the birth of the future Sun King, this exceptional vineyard became known as the Baby Jesus, or Divin de Infant de Jesus, or Baby Jesus, as I like to call it. All right, a monopole of the domain since 1791. Exotic spices, toasty oak on the nose with some wild strawberry and raspberry coulis-like fruit. Pretty floral aromas, really nice amount of fresh earth showing in this wine as well. Some distinct terroir from that Bone Grouse vineyard, and wow, really big on the palate. Bright cherry and wild strawberry fruit showing through, fine tannins. This wine showing elegance and finesse, even though it is a little monster. Still somewhat unevolved on the palate, but this wine has got outstanding potential for the future. The 1949, one of the greatest old Burgundies that I've ever tasted. Killer Juice 2010 Bouchard Baby Jesus. That's what we had to drink at the Bouchard and William Fevre tasting. I'm your host, Andrew Lamposoni, signing off for the Wine Watch, saying remember, always drink the good stuff first.